Both you and Minnesota's governor have made some comments over the past few days about the elements within these protests that have driven them from peaceful protests, from peaceful expressions of anger and impatience, as you put it, into more violent acts, into things like arson and looting and violence and violent confrontation. You've talked about it essentially being external elements that blame should be assigned to which blame should be assigned for those aspects of the protest. I want to know if your perception of that has changed over the past 2 days, and if that's still what you think is the greatest risk in terms of things curdling and things going from peaceful to violent overnight.
You know, Rachel, that's a very good point. And, you know, I like to point out there's sort of two completely different things happening. There's those peaceful protests, those legitimate protests of people who are just driven by a sense of justice and fairness, people who want to just secure the good, the health, the economic and physical well-being of our communities. I contend that those goals cannot be achieved by burning down our neighborhood stores, our neighborhood restaurants, our neighborhood pharmacies, our neighborhood local businesses. And so there's a second group of folks who have been out and about in Minnesota over the past week who are driven by a desire to break windows and start fires and destroy our communities. And the purpose of the curfew that you mentioned earlier is to sort of separate the two so our law enforcement professionals can have room to work. They're doing a fantastic job. I'll tell you what, I don't know where those folks who are trying to incite us to violence, incite us to destroy our own communities, I don't know where they sleep at night. But I'll tell you, if that's the way you look at my community, I see you as an outsider.
Let me just ask you one last question, Mayor Carter, and that is about the president's remarks tonight in which he's threatening to deploy active duty, in his words, heavily armed U.S. troops around the country. At his own say-so, he's threatening to invoke the kind of federal authority that would make it would give him the power to do that, even if governors objected and didn't want those federally deployed U.S. active duty troops. What do you think about the prospect of having active duty U.S. soldiers heavily armed in the streets of St. Paul?
But Rachel, I will tell you, even by this administration's shockingly low standards, that threat to say to governors they have to, quote, dominate the American people. And unless they dominate our cities and our states, the federal government was never designed, was never instituted to dominate American people. That is the closest thing to a declaration of war on our American people that I've heard in my lifetime. I will tell you this. I have been on the phone today with my governor, Governor Tim Walz, who in 2008, as a U.S. congressman representing District 1 in Minnesota, was the lead author of the reestablishment of the Federal Insurrection Act, which basically restored what the Bush administration cut out from it. Governor Walz, who again was the lead author of that act, has guaranteed me that in Minnesota, we're not doing it. We're not federalizing our troops.